They say every family has its secrets, but mine hid theirs behind a smile and a slice of red velvet cake. It was Aunt Lydia's 70th birthday party, an occasion that was supposed to bring everyone together. She'd rented out the sunroom of an upscale country club in Connecticut. There were strings of fairy lights, crystal flutes of champagne, a jazz trio in the corner. Everyone was dressed in florals and linen, mingling like we were the Kennedys. I'd spent the entire morning helping set up, arranging tables, checking the gift list, making sure the gluten-free options were properly labeled. I did everything short of baking the cake myself. The cake, ironically, was the centerpiece. 3 tiers, fondant flowers, gold lettering that said, "To our matriarch with love." I remember staring at it, half proud, half exhausted, when I heard the laughter. At first, it was just background noise. Then a phrase floated through the air, clear as a slap. "She's not even really family, I mean, come on." It was my cousin Brett's voice, cocky, nasal, always just a little too loud. I turned slightly, not enough to be obvious, and saw them. Brett, Lauren and Tasha hunched together by the mimosa bar. They didn't know I was close enough to hear, or maybe they didn't care. "I know," Lauren chimed in, swirling her drink. "She acts like she's one of us, like, please." "You were adopted in, not born in. Bet she thinks she's getting the same cut from the trust," Tasha added with a smirk. "Dream on." Then they all laughed, light, dismissive, cruel. Something inside me buckled. Not like a sharp pain, but a quiet, crumbling shift. The kind you feel in your spine when you realize something that's always been true, even if you never wanted to believe it. For years I'd told myself I belonged. That love made a family, not blood. But in that moment all the dinners, the shared vacations, the "we're so proud of you" cards felt like a lie wrapped in Hallmark paper. I stepped back, away from the cake, from their laughter, from the room that had never really been mine. My hands shook. Not with anger, at least not yet. It was grief. Pure, unfiltered grief. The kind that only comes when you realize you've spent your life chasing a place at a table that was never meant to include you. You know what's funny? I didn't cry. Not then. I straightened my blazer, plastered a smile on my face, and went to refill the lemonade pitchers like nothing had happened. That's how deep the training runs when you grow up needing to be accepted. But something shifted that day, a crack in the foundation. And once it starts, no matter how much you patch, the structure remembers. And before we go any further, don't forget to subscribe for more real, jaw-dropping stories just like this one. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. The rest of the party went on like clockwork. Lydia gave a speech that made everyone teary. People took turns posing for photos beside the cake. Brett gave a toast where he called me like a sister, and I nearly choked on my soda. Tasha hugged me tight when she left, saying, "We're lucky to have you." All I could think was, if this is what love feels like, maybe I don't want it. That night I lay awake in the guest room of Lydia's house, replaying the words in my head. "She's not even really family," over and over. I thought of my parents, how they died in a snowstorm when I was 6, how Aunt Lydia had taken me in without hesitation, how she'd brushed my hair, packed my lunches, taught me to write thank you cards, how she'd said again and again, "You're one of mine." Was it true? Or had she just said it because it sounded noble? Because it was easier than facing the truth, that I was a charity case they dressed up as kin. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the looks, the whispers, the constant jokes about me being the organized one, the serious one, the outsider, they weren't jokes. They were warning signs. And I'd ignored them. But not anymore. Because here's the thing, when you grow up always proving your worth, always walking the line between grateful and invisible, you learn how to keep receipts. And I had plenty. The cake was just the final straw. The moment that peeled back the mask. They thought I was just the help, the placeholder, the adopted niece who should be grateful for scraps. What they didn't know was that I held the key to the thing they loved most, and soon they were going to find out. When I was 6 years old, my life ended and started on the same night. It was late December, the kind of bone-deep cold that wraps around you like wet wool. My parents had taken me to see a holiday light show out by the harbor. I remember sitting in the back seat, my mittened hands pressed against the frosty window, watching glowing reindeer dance across rooftops. They were laughing. My mum was singing along with a carol on the radio, and my dad kept reaching over to squeeze her knee like he always did when he thought no one was looking. I don't remember the impact. I just remember waking up in a hospital bed, a nurse whispering something soft while a machine beeped steadily in the background. My leg was in a cast. My parents were gone. After the funeral, closed casket, white roses, too many hugs from strangers, I was handed over to Aunt Lydia. She was my mom's older sister, a no-nonsense woman with perfect posture and a voice like velvet-wrapped steel. She didn't cry when she picked me up. She just knelt in front of me and said, "You're with me now and I will never let you go." I believed her. Lydia lived in a sprawling colonial house with white shutters and a wraparound porch. She had 3 children of her own, Brett, Lauren and Tasha, all several years older than me. I was the outsider from the moment I stepped into that house, clutching a teddy bear with one eye and smelling like antiseptic and grief. At first, they were kind, or maybe just confused. They let me sit at their table, shared their toys, even let me have the last pancake once or twice. But kids have a radar for difference. I didn't look like them, didn't talk like them, didn't understand their inside jokes or bedtime routines. I tried. God, I tried. I learned to like their cereal, to laugh at their cartoons, to color within their lines. And still, there was always this pause, this half-second delay before they passed the juice or asked me to play or included me in a conversation, like I was a guest. Like they were waiting for someone to take me back. But Lydia never treated me that way. She made space for me, not just physically, but emotionally. She enrolled me in therapy, put my drawings on the fridge, came to every school play. She started calling me sweetheart, the same way she did with her own kids. When I had nightmares, she would crawl into bed with me and hum lullabies I barely remembered my mother singing. I clung to her affection like it was air. By the time I was 10, people had stopped asking whose child I was. Lydia introduced me as her daughter. The neighbors accepted it, the teachers never questioned it. And yet, inside that house, the difference lingered, not overt, not hostile. Just present, like a shadow that moved even when I stood still. When I got good grades, it was impressive. When Brett did, it was expected. When I helped clean up after dinner, I was so mature. When Lauren did, it was just being part of the family. The same actions, different weights. Still, I never blamed Lydia. She was doing her best, and I loved her for it. I told myself that if I just kept showing up, kept being good, kept being helpful, I would earn my place fully and finally. I stopped talking about my parents after a while, not because I forgot, but because it made people uncomfortable. Lydia kept one picture of them on the hallway table next to the umbrella stand. I'd pass it every morning, whisper hi under my breath and move on. They felt like a dream I wasn't allowed to keep having. As I got older, the subtle separations became more apparent. Vacations were planned without asking if I wanted to come. Family jokes referenced memories I wasn't part of. During holidays, I noticed my stocking was always slightly smaller, my name written in different handwriting. No one meant to be cruel. That's the thing, they just didn't think. And that hurt more than any deliberate exclusion, but I kept going, kept smiling, kept organizing their birthday parties and remembering everyone's allergies and calling Lydia Mom when it felt safe. And in return, I had stability. I had warm meals, a good education, someone who showed up for me. I had Lydia, and for a long time, that felt like enough. I told myself blood didn't matter. That family was built, not born. That if I loved them hard enough, they'd eventually love me back the same way. It took a cake and a careless laugh to shatter that illusion. But looking back, the cracks had always been there. When I turned 16, Lydia took me to brunch, just the 2 of us. It was spring, and she wore a lavender blouse with a brooch shaped like a hummingbird. I remember that because she only wore it on important days, weddings, graduations, funerals. I didn't know which one this was supposed to be. We sat on the patio of her favorite cafe, sipping Earl Grey and eating lemon scones. She looked at me for a long moment, then reached into her purse and handed me a folder. Inside was the first glimpse of the trust. She'd created it years ago after my parents died, apparently, with the intention of ensuring all her children would have financial stability into adulthood. There were stipulations, clauses, legal language I barely understood. But the heart of it was this. Upon her death, each of us, Brett, Lauren, Tasha, and me, would receive equal shares. Equal. She emphasized that word. "You're mine," she said, tapping the edge of the folder. "This makes it official. No one gets more than you. No one gets less. That's how it will stay." I was stunned, not because I didn't believe she cared, but because it felt like a kind of recognition I'd always longed for but never expected. Paperwork wasn't love, but it was permanence. It was proof. And to a kid who'd lost everything once, permanence meant more than anything. From that day forward, the trust became a quiet presence in my life. Not an obsession, but a reassurance. Lydia made sure I understood money, not just how to spend it, but how to grow it, protect it, use it responsibly. I took courses in personal finance, asked questions at the bank, shadowed her when she met with her advisor. She told me more than once, being smart with money is how you make sure people don't control you. I listened. Meanwhile, the others didn't. Brett leased a BMW the moment he turned 18. Lauren started a handbag collection that could fund a small country. Tasha once flew to Coachella in a helicopter and didn't understand why anyone thought that was extravagant. Their attitudes toward the trust were casual at best, entitled at worst. It wasn't income to them, it was inheritance, a given. But to me, it was different. It was respect, recognition, proof that Lydia didn't just take me in because she had to, but because she chose to claim me. When I turned 25, I received a certified letter. Lydia had updated the trust. She was naming me as the successor trustee. I sat at my kitchen table, letter trembling in my hand, reading the paragraph over and over. I knew what it meant. If anything happened to her, I'd be the one in charge, not Brett, the eldest, not Lauren, the favorite, not Tasha, the charmer, me. It wasn't a power trip. It was responsibility and a risk, because nothing tests loyalty like control. I didn't tell anyone about the letter at first. Lydia advised me not to. "When the time comes," she said, "you'll do what's right, but people don't always react well to what's right." She was right. Because as the years passed and Lydia's health began to shift, nothing dramatic, just the slow changes age brings, I started to notice the shift in the others. Suddenly, they were more interested in her estate. Brett asked about the value of the house. Lauren mentioned taxes casually. Tasha brought up Lydia's wishes over wine one night, framing it as concern, but glancing at me the whole time like she knew something she wasn't saying. I stayed quiet. I played along. I acted clueless. But inside, I was watching, documenting, preparing. Because I knew how they saw me. The charity case, the tag-along, the girl with no claim but a lot of gratitude. And I knew that when the time came, they wouldn't respect my place unless it was written in black and white. That's the thing about trust funds. They don't just hold money, they hold truths about love, loyalty, resentment. And if you look close enough, you see the cracks in what people call family. Even Lydia, with all her grace and good intentions, couldn't stop that. Still, I wanted to believe. I wanted to believe that her faith in me meant something, that the trust wasn't just legal, that it was personal. So I kept doing what I'd always done, managing, supporting, staying 2 steps ahead. While the others spent, I saved. While they joked, I listened. While they assumed, I prepared. Because I knew the day was coming when I'd have to prove I was more than a placeholder. And when it came, I wouldn't need to raise my voice. I'd just need to open the folder. If you've never been the quiet one in a room full of people who think they're smarter than you, let me explain how it works. You smile, you nod, you play along. And all the while, you're keeping mental notes like ledger entries. It started small, subtle changes in tone. At family dinners, when I brought up a budgeting tip or mentioned a market shift, the room would go silent for a beat too long. Then Brett would crack a joke about me talking numbers again, and everyone would laugh, even Lydia. It was never mean, but it chipped away little by little. Lauren started calling me the accountant behind my back. She thought I didn't know, but Miles told me. He overheard it at a brunch she invited him to, back when he still tried to befriend my family for my sake. "Don't take it personally," he said. But how could I not? Every nickname, every glance, every polite chuckle after a jab, none of it was neutral. And yet, they depended on me. As Lydia began stepping back from the trust's daily management, she let me handle more. Renewing insurance policies, evaluating investments, approving quarterly distributions. She trusted me completely, and at first, so did they. Or rather, they didn't pay enough attention to realize I had the wheel now, until the first denied request. Brett wanted to withdraw an early advance to invest in a startup he read about on Reddit. I reviewed the paperwork and denied it. Too risky, no collateral, zero due diligence. He called me the next day, furious. "You don't get to say no," he barked. "It's not your money." "Actually, it is," I replied calmly. "Or it will be. And until then, it's Lydia's. And I have her full authority." He hung up on me. That was the first domino. Tasha followed with a request to use trust funds for a trip to Ibiza for wellness. I asked for receipts, invoices, and a post-trip report. She laughed like I was joking. I wasn't. From then on, the air changed. Every interaction was tinged with this oily mix of sarcasm and suspicion. At Thanksgiving, Lauren made a toast to those who know how to keep money in the family, looking directly at me. At Lydia's garden party, Brett offered to explain crypto slowly so I wouldn't get too lost in the weeds. I smiled. I nodded. I kept notes, but I also kept receipts. I documented every conversation, every denied request, every message with Lydia confirming that my actions aligned with her wishes. I wasn't being paranoid. I was being precise, because I could feel it building. The tension wasn't just emotional anymore. It was structural, financial. And I wasn't the only one who noticed. Lydia pulled me aside one evening after dinner. Her hands were slower now, her gait softer, her eyes sharper than ever. "I know what they say about you," she said. "I've heard the whispers." I looked down, ashamed, but she placed her hand over mine. "Let them whisper," she said. "You're doing exactly what I hoped you would. You're protecting the legacy." That word, legacy, sat with me, heavy, dangerous. It implied something sacred, something worth preserving. But to them it just meant money, entitlement, status. They didn't see it as stewardship, they saw it as a birthright. What they didn't understand was that I wasn't managing the trust because I wanted power over them. I was managing it because Lydia trusted me to be the one who wouldn't let it rot under greed and laziness. I respected her more than I feared their resentment. But that resentment was growing. Brett started showing up to family gatherings late, leaving early, never saying more than a grunt in my direction. Lauren skipped my birthday for the third year in a row. Tasha posted passive-aggressive quotes on Instagram about controlling people disguised as caregivers. I said nothing, because I'd learned something they hadn't. Real power doesn't need to announce itself. It's patient. It waits. And when the time comes, it speaks once, clearly, cleanly, finally. Still, I clung to hope. A small, foolish hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd come around. That all the years I'd spent trying to prove I belonged would mean something. That they'd see me as what Lydia already did. Family. But the more they sneered, the more they distanced themselves, the clearer it became. They didn't want a family member running the trust. They wanted a puppet, and I was nobody's puppet. Aunt Lydia's 70th birthday was supposed to be a celebration of life, of legacy, of everything she'd built. Instead, it was the beginning of its unraveling. She wanted something grand, something elegant but not excessive, as she put it. She chose the country club where she'd been a member for decades, a place where chandeliers sparkled above polished wood floors and servers moved like clockwork. I handled the logistics, guest list, menu, flowers, entertainment, hours. I knew how she liked things. Soft jazz, white hydrangeas, chicken piccata, not too much garlic. The invitations were mailed 6 weeks in advance. Everyone RSVP'd quickly, no doubt sensing it might be her last truly extravagant celebration. Age had slowed her down, but not her pride. She wanted this memory to live in photos and stories long after her energy faded. The night arrived clear and crisp. Lydia wore a sapphire dress that brought out the silver in her hair. I wore navy and pearls, simple, understated. The cousins arrived fashionably late, of course. Lauren in stilettos too high for the brick path, Brett with his latest girlfriend on his arm, Tasha swishing in sequins like she was headed to an awards gala. Everyone smiled, everyone hugged. The performance of closeness was flawless. Until it wasn't. I'd spent the entire evening on my feet, coordinating servers, checking the playlist, managing the candle table. As usual, I was the invisible glue holding the event together. That's when the caterer tapped my shoulder and whispered something about the cake delivery. I nodded and made my way toward the service corridor to check on it. That's when I heard them. Brett, Lauren and Tasha, near the mimosa bar. Their voices low, not secretive, just smug. "She's really taking the whole hostess thing seriously," Brett muttered. Tasha snorted. "Of course she is. She's been trying to prove she belongs since she was a kid." "Still thinks she's one of us," Lauren said, the ice in her glass clinking. "It's sad, really." Then Brett, chuckling, "She might be on the paperwork, but let's be honest, she's not real family." They laughed. That sound again. That same sound I'd heard years ago, soft and sharp, slicing through me like a wire. Something hollowed out in me. The world around me slowed. The music became distant. The scent of buttercream and lilies turned faint. I stood there frozen, invisible in the doorway, until their conversation drifted off toward new targets. Someone's outfit. Someone's +1. I turned back down the hallway, leaned against the wall, and let myself breathe. Not cry. Just breathe. I'd survived worse. I'd survived death, displacement, rejection. This was just confirmation of what I already knew. Still, it stung. Worse than before because now I was grown. I had power. I had agency. And they still saw me as a guest at their table. I pulled myself together, returned to the main room, and helped light the candles on the cake. When Lydia called for everyone's attention, she waved me forward. "Come help me cut the cake, sweetheart." Sweetheart. I stepped beside her, the knife in my hand, the cameras flashing. She smiled, beaming, so proud, so oblivious. Brett leaned in from the side and said low enough for only me to hear, "Make sure you don't cut too big a slice for yourself." I stared at him. Then I smiled. Because in that moment, I made a decision, not out of anger, not out of revenge, out of clarity. The cake was beautiful, white fondant, gold trim, edible flowers, a centerpiece, a celebration. But to me it was a symbol of performance, of inclusion that wasn't real, of effort that was never going to be enough. So I cut the first slice. I handed it to Lydia. I passed plates to each of them, one by one, and I noted who looked me in the eye. None of them did. After the candles were blown out, the toasts given, the music faded and the guests began to leave, I stayed behind to help clean up. Lydia, exhausted but content, kissed my cheek and whispered, "You made this perfect." I nodded, smiled, and watched her walk away with the cousins flanking her like a royal entourage. I gathered stray napkins and empty glasses, each movement slower than the last. By the time the staff cleared the last of the tables, I was the only one left in the room. Except for Miles, who stepped in from the patio. He looked at me for a long second and said, "You okay?" I nodded again. But I wasn't, because something in me had broken, not in the way that shatters, but in the way that hardens. And I knew exactly what I was going to do next. In the days following the party, everything appeared normal on the surface. Lydia sent thank you cards. Lauren posted photos of the cake, tagging everyone but me. Brett complained about the champagne selection in a group chat I wasn't included in. Tasha uploaded a video montage set to some overused acoustic cover, her caption gushing about family legacy. I watched it all unfold, silent and still. Something inside me had calcified, not out of bitterness, but clarity. For the first time, I saw the roles we each played with surgical precision. I wasn't the outsider. I was the mirror they all resented, the one who reflected back the entitlement they wore like perfume. So I began to plan, not out of revenge, out of necessity. I pulled the trust documents from my safe, laid them out on my kitchen table, and reread every clause, every amendment, every comma. I took notes, highlighted, created cross-referenced indexes like it was an exam. Because in a way it was. This wasn't about feeling hurt anymore. This was about structure, legality, governance. The very system they took for granted had rules, and I had followed them. Still, I didn't move impulsively. That would have been a mistake. I needed grounding. So I called Miles. He came over with Thai food and wine, and we sat on my balcony while I walked him through what happened at the party, word for word. "They said it out loud?" he asked. I nodded. He leaned back in his chair and exhaled. "So, what are you going to do?" I looked down at my wine glass. "Hold them accountable." His eyes flickered. "Legally?" "Yes." A pause. Then he nodded. Not because he agreed with the decision immediately, but because he understood that I wasn't someone who spoke in empty threats. The next morning, I made 2 phone calls. The first to Lydia's lawyer, who had worked on the trust since its creation. I asked for a private consultation to review current beneficiary conduct and trustee authority. The second to a therapist I hadn't seen in years, Dr. Ralston. She was blunt, warm, and always cut through emotional fog like a scalpel. When I told her what happened, she didn't interrupt. When I finished, she said, "And what's the worst-case scenario you're preparing for?" "They'll hate me," I answered without hesitation. "Do they love you now?" Silence. "I think you're not burning a bridge," she continued. "You're acknowledging it was never built right in the first place." That line stayed with me. For the next 2 weeks, I kept everything quiet, attended Lydia's check-ins, reviewed quarterly reports, maintained my schedule, outwardly calm, inwardly calculating. I started reviewing financial transactions, Brett's overdrawn advances, Tasha's frivolous travel reimbursements, Lauren's consulting fees with no attached documentation. All of it was there. Each violation neatly filed, each misuse a fingerprint of disregard. I created a full report, appended with copies of text threads, flagged expenses, and my own meeting logs with Lydia that confirmed approval for each enforcement action I'd ever taken. And still, I hesitated. Not because I didn't believe I was right, because I knew once I acted there would be no return. They would never look at me the same way again, not even Lydia, especially not Lydia. She would understand, maybe even support me, but it would change things. Trust once used as a weapon always leaves a scar. I thought about the years I spent folding myself into their family like origami, about Lydia's lullabies, about the photo of my parents she still kept on her entry table. I thought about all the birthdays I planned, the essays I edited for Tasha, the rides I gave Brett when his car got towed, the nights I stayed up helping Lauren with job applications she barely thanked me for. None of it was enough. So I stood in my kitchen one night, the stack of documents in my hand, and stared out the window. The house was quiet. Still. A kind of pre-storm silence. And that's when I knew. I wasn't being vindictive, I was being free. Because protecting what Lydia built meant protecting it from them. I mailed the letters on a Monday morning, not emails, not text messages, physical letters, certified return receipt requested. I wanted them to feel the weight of what they were about to read. I wanted the envelope to sit heavy in their hands, to announce this wasn't a casual update. It was a declaration. Each one said the same thing in language both formal and final. Due to irregularities in spending behavior and failure to comply with Section 8.4 of the Family Trust Agreement, distributions will be temporarily suspended pending a full financial review. In plain terms, their money was cut off. Temporarily, yes, but even that word was conditional, because I knew once the investigation began, it wouldn't be temporary for long. I didn't sign it, love. I didn't soften the message. I signed it with my full name, followed by trustee. The reaction was immediate. Brett called me less than 2 hours after he got his letter. No hello, just shouting. "You're insane. Who the hell do you think you are?" I let him go on for 37 seconds. I counted. Then I said, "You'll need to direct all further communication through legal counsel." He screamed something about bloodlines and betrayal and hung up. Lauren posted a passive-aggressive tweet within the hour. Funny how some people get a taste of power and lose their humanity. She blocked me right after. Tasha called Lydia. Not me. Lydia. I found out when Lydia left me a voicemail later that night. "They're upset," she said quietly. "They don't understand. I told them I'd speak with you." But she didn't sound angry, just tired. I sat on my couch in silence, listening to her voice, her pauses. The subtext wasn't hard to hear. I'm not going to interfere. But I don't want to be in the crossfire. The following day, Brett sent me a cease and desist letter through a third-rate lawyer who once handled his condo lease. It was laughable, poorly formatted, full of misspellings, no legal standing. I filed it under desperate. Lauren followed up with a demand to review every penny I'd ever touched, as if I'd embezzled something. I emailed her back a clean spreadsheet with footnotes, timestamps, and approval logs. No response. Tasha took to Instagram. She recorded a teary-eyed story about fake siblings and financial abuse, conveniently omitting her spa weekend in Arizona billed to the trust's emergency fund. The smear campaign wasn't surprising. What did surprise me was how quickly the walls closed in. People I'd known for years, extended family, family friends, Lydia's bridge partners, started texting me cryptic messages like, "Hope you're doing okay," or "Maybe there's another way to resolve this." They all assumed I'd cracked, that I was just bitter and finally showing my true colors. But I hadn't cracked. I'd crystallized. The truth was, for the first time in my life, I wasn't bending to make others comfortable. I was standing still. And stillness made them nervous. I consulted Lydia's attorney twice more over the next week. We reviewed trust policies, confirmed compliance, prepared for the possibility of arbitration. Every step I took was documented, reviewed, and legally sound. That didn't stop the emotional warfare. Lauren sent a group message to the Real Cousins thread, not realizing Miles had once seen it pop up on Tasha's phone, not realizing I knew it existed. The message said, "We need to find a way to stop her. She's acting like she's Lydia's heir, not her niece." That word niece rang loud. Not daughter, not sister, not family, just a legal leftover. I started sleeping with my phone on airplane mode. One night someone keyed my car. No witnesses, no footage, just a jagged line down the driver's side, cruel and deliberate. I filed a report. Quietly. I didn't accuse anyone. I didn't need to. They were unraveling and I was only watching. What hurt more than the attacks was the silence from Lydia. She didn't defend me publicly. She didn't clarify the record. She didn't issue a family email explaining that I was simply doing my job. She stayed silent. Maybe she thought that was neutral, that saying nothing meant she wasn't choosing sides. But in times like these, silence is a vote. I still saw her weekly, helped with her meds, sorted her mail. She'd smile and say thank you, and we'd talk about books or weather or the new neighbor's overgrown lawn. Never about the letters, never about the fallout. I began to wonder if she regretted giving me power, if she wished she'd just left it to them, even if they squandered it. At least there'd be peace, but I wasn't built for quiet corruption. I wasn't built to smile and nod and hand over the keys while they set fire to everything Lydia spent her life building. So I sat in the middle of the storm, untouched, not afraid, not angry, just ready. A week after the letters detonated what was left of the family dynamic, Lydia asked to see me. No preamble, no explanation, just a voicemail. "Can you come by tomorrow morning?" Alone. I showed up at 9 sharp. She was waiting in the sunroom, a blanket over her lap, her favorite mug beside her. Chamomile, I knew by the scent. I sat down across from her and waited. She didn't speak at first, just watched me with those pale, grey eyes that had once felt so warm. "Are you tired?" she asked softly. Yes, I said. No use pretending. I am too. Silence. Then she said, I read the letters. So it wasn't a surprise. Somehow that made it worse. I didn't want it to be this way, she continued. I thought they'd mature, grow into the kind of people I believed they could be. I swallowed. They didn't. No, she said. They didn't. Another pause. The clock on the mantel ticked too loudly. I should have spoken up, she said. I should have defended you. I said nothing. I thought my silence would protect you, she went on, that staying neutral would keep the peace. But peace built on silence is just a truce waiting to break. She looked smaller than I remembered. Frailer. Her voice carried a tremor I'd never heard before. You're not the villain here, she said. And I never doubted that you were the right person to protect the trust. I didn't want to admit what that would cost. What does it cost? I asked. Family, she whispered. That word again, its weight shifting, stretching. But they're the ones who threw that away, I said, not me. She nodded slowly, as if agreeing with something she'd already known, but resisted saying out loud. Then she picked up a folder from beside her chair and handed it to me. Her handwriting on the label, Final Amendment. I opened it. A notarized document. Effective immediately, I would hold full and permanent control of the trust. No co-trustees, no oversight committee, no room for contestation. My name, alone, was written at the bottom. It's done, she said. Why now? Because they made it clear who they are, and you made it clear who you are. Tears welled unexpectedly, not from victory, from grief. Why did you wait so long to tell me? She looked down at her hands. Because I was afraid. Of what? Losing them. But you didn't lose them. They left. She nodded again. Then she reached for my hand, her grip softer than I remembered. I'm sorry, she said, for not protecting you sooner, for letting them treat you like less, for needing you to be strong before you ever had a chance to just be. My throat closed. I wanted to say it was okay, that I understood. But it wasn't okay. And I had understood too much for too long. Still, I squeezed her hand back. I did what I thought was right, I said. Even when it hurt. I know, and I'm proud of you. She said it like a benediction. We sat there a long while, listening to the wind against the windows, the distant creak of floorboards, the hush of something ending. When I stood to leave, she pulled me into a hug. Her arms were thin, but her hold was firm. You were never a guest, she said into my shoulder. You were my daughter. You are. It undid me. For years I had lived between lines, afraid to claim a title, afraid to presume too much. And in that moment, it was given freely. I didn't need the trust to prove anything anymore. But having it meant I could protect what mattered. Lydia's intentions, the family name, and maybe in time, something even larger than us both. As I walked out of the house, the sun broke through the clouds in a rare winter burst of light. Everything had changed, and everything was finally, painfully, honest. The official filing went through 2 weeks after Lydia signed the amendment. There were no dramatic court hearings, no televised battles, just paperwork, clean, surgical. The trust was now solely under my authority. Legally, there was nothing they could do. Morally, they would make it their life's mission to prove otherwise. The backlash came fast. Brett's lawyer sent a demand for reinstatement of benefits, citing unjust removal and emotional damages. I sent back the section of the trust that outlined his violations, itemized in bullet points with attached receipts. Lauren went live on social media, with a filtered face and a shaky voice, talking about generational wealth being hijacked by someone who never earned it. The comments were split. Some offered sympathy. Others reminded her that trust funds weren't personal savings accounts. Tasha tried a different tactic, sent me flowers with a handwritten note. We were all just angry. Maybe we could sit down and talk. I didn't respond. Then came the escalation. A subpoena. Brett had filed for a formal hearing to challenge the amendment. It was flimsy, desperate, but it meant I'd have to appear. Lydia wasn't well enough to attend. She sent a signed statement instead, confirming everything. My appointment, my integrity, her full trust in me. It was notarized, sealed, and legally bulletproof. Still, the hearing was uncomfortable. Brett sat across the table, smug in a tailored suit he probably couldn't afford without trust disbursements. Lauren stared daggers. Tasha wouldn't even look at me. Their lawyer tried to paint me as manipulative, said I'd taken advantage of Lydia in her old age, said I'd isolated her, said I was enforcing rules that were never meant to be used that way. I didn't flinch. I presented records, emails. Lydia's video statement played before the room, in which she clearly and calmly confirmed her decisions. She even smiled at the end and said, "I trust her more than I've ever trusted anyone." That smile ended the argument. The judge ruled in my favor. The amendment stood. The control remained mine. I walked out of the building into a burst of spring air, not triumphant, relieved, exhausted, hollow. Winning against family never feels like victory. It feels like loss, sharpened. But it was done. The weeks that followed were eerily quiet. No calls, no messages, not even passive-aggressive posts. They had gone silent. I used the time to restructure. I met with advisors, accountants, non-profits. I looked at what Lydia had built, not just financially but philosophically. Her goal had never been to coddle heirs. It had been to preserve values, to ensure that her life's work had purpose beyond indulgence. So I began reallocating funds, scholarships for students aging out of foster care, housing stipends for women escaping domestic violence, seed grants for small businesses owned by immigrants. I read every application. I interviewed candidates. I built something from the wreckage. People told me I was generous, brave, forward-thinking. But really, I was just correcting course. I didn't erase the cousins entirely. They remained beneficiaries, technically. But under strict performance conditions, verified employment, community involvement, financial literacy certification. If they wanted support, they had to earn it. So far, none of them had applied. Lydia's health declined slowly but steadily. I visited daily. Sometimes she was lucid, sometimes not. On her better days, we sat on the porch and talked about the past. She never brought up the fallout. Neither did I. It hovered between us, acknowledged by its absence. One evening, she squeezed my hand and said, "You didn't just protect the trust, you redeemed it." That was the moment I finally let myself believe I'd done something right. I'd spent so many years trying to be enough, trying to be good, quiet, useful, invisible when needed, indispensable when required. And in the end, all it took was one clean break to see that I had never been the one lacking. They had. They mistook generosity for weakness, mistook silence for surrender, mistook me for someone who wouldn't fight. They were wrong, and now they would live with that. A few weeks after Lydia passed, I drove to the cemetery alone. It was early. The sun barely brushing the tops of the trees, the air still thick with dew. I carried no flowers, no grand speech, just quiet. Her grave was simple. Her full name, her dates, a single line beneath. She gave more than she had to. I stood there longer than I expected to, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I knew too much. Every word felt like it would collapse into 100 others. So I settled on this. Thank you. That was it. 2 words. For the years she gave me. For the mistakes she tried to fix. For the love she gave even when it was late. For the trust, in every sense of the word. I placed my hand on the cool stone and walked away. That afternoon I returned home and finally opened the letter she'd left for me. I'd found it tucked in her dresser drawer, addressed in her delicate cursive. For when you're ready, it wasn't long, just a page. She wrote about love, about regret, about how she wished she'd been louder for me sooner, how watching me stand alone had been the proudest and hardest thing she'd ever done. At the end, she wrote, "You always were my family, not because I said so, but because you made it true, and now it's yours to define." I folded the letter and placed it in the safe next to the original trust documents, legacy, paper and memory, side by side. In the months that followed, I continued the work. The scholarship program expanded. We funded a youth center, partnered with literacy initiatives. The trust that had once fueled excess was now feeding futures. No headlines, no applause, just quiet change. And the cousins? Brett disappeared from public view. Rumor had it he moved out west. Started a podcast about wealth and wellness, whatever that means. Lauren attempted to start her own foundation. It folded within a year. Tasha married a tech bro and now travels between continents. I doubt she even remembers the terms of the trust. None of them reached out again, and I didn't chase them. Sometimes people leave a story and that's the ending. Not every thread ties up. Not every wound closes with a handshake. I used to believe family was about endurance, how long you stayed, how much you tolerated, how quietly you endured. Now I believe it's about alignment, about shared values, chosen commitments. Love that isn't transactional. Family isn't just who raises you or who's in the photos or who shares your name. It's who shows up when it matters. Miles stayed. He saw me through it all. When the hate flooded in, when the letters landed, when the silence from Lydia cut deeper than any insult, he was there. No judgment, no agenda, just presence. We don't talk about the trust much. He knows what it cost. One night, sitting on my porch under a warm sky, he asked, "Do you regret it?" I thought about it for a while. "I regret that it had to be done," I said, "but not that I did it." That's still true. Some people inherit power and wield it recklessly. Some people inherit power and bury it in guilt. And some of us inherit it knowing full well it's not a gift, it's a responsibility. I didn't win anything. I was handed a mess and asked to protect it. So I did. Not because I needed to prove anything to them, but because I owed it to Lydia and to myself. If you've made it this far, maybe part of this feels familiar. Maybe you've been the one left out of the group photo. The one with a different last name. The one who gives more than they get and still gets questioned. If so, let me tell you this. Blood isn't bond. Kindness is. Respect is. Truth is. You don't have to carry someone else's silence. You don't have to prove what should have been given freely. You just have to stand in your truth, even if it makes the room uncomfortable, especially then. And if this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of something you've lived through or survived, then take a moment to subscribe. Because there are more stories like this one, stories that hit deep and stay with you. And before you go, click on the next video waiting for you on screen. You're not alone, and you never were.